Before Leyndell ever burned, before ash buried its streets and silence replaced ceremony, the city was already dying, not from invasion, not from rebellion, but from a decision made at its very center. Leyndell was the most protected place in the lands between. Its walls were absolute, its soldiers unyielding, its God unquestioned, and yet every path into the capital tells the same quiet story. Gates sealed, bridges guarded, outsiders turned away. This was not a city preparing for war. It was a city being withdrawn from the world. At the heart of that withdrawal stands Marika. The fall of Leyndell was not the moment the Erd tree burned. It was the moment Marika chose preservation over people, symbol over society. The question is not whether the capital fell. The question is whether it was ever meant to survive at all. Before we part, the Golden Order grows through faith, and this archive is still young. If you'd like to walk alongside it, one quiet gesture is enough. You have my thanks. Sincerely. Leyndell mattered because everything else depended on it. The laws of the Golden Order radiated outward from this city, enforced by faith, soldiers, and the quiet certainty that the Erd tree stood above all dispute. When the capital closed its gates, the world did not simply lose access to a city. It lost access to meaning. This is what makes the fall of Leyndell more than architectural ruin. When the capital withdrew, the lands between fractured. Authority became local, violent, improvised. Demigods carved territories out of belief rather than law. The shattering did not begin on distant battlefields. It began when the center stopped holding. The cost was not paid by thrones or banners, but by people who had lived their entire lives under the assumption that order was permanent. Leyndell's common districts show no signs of evacuation, only stagnation. Soldiers still patrol routes that lead nowhere. Priests tend to rituals whose recipients no longer exist. The city keeps functioning because it does not know how to stop. This is the real stake of Leyndell's fall. If the capital collapses, then the Golden Order was never divine truth. It was administrative power, carefully curated and fiercely defended. And if that power could be sealed away, isolated, and ultimately buried, then the God who built it was willing to let the world unravel to preserve something far narrower than salvation. That God was Marika, and Leyndell was the proof that her order only worked as long as it remained untouched. Leyndell didn't rise naturally. It was assembled with intent, layered stone over older stone, authority built on top of conquest and revision. Long before it became the Golden Capital, this was a site of accumulation, where victories were stored and rewritten as destiny. The Erd tree did not simply grow here, it was centered here, framed, ritualized, and surrounded by walls that declared permanence. The city's design tells us what it was for. Leyndell faces inward. Its avenues funnel toward the Erd tree. Its districts narrow as they rise, compressing movement and attention toward a single axis of power. This is not a capital meant to be shared. It is a capital meant to be approached, judged, and denied. Every outer defense exists to slow arrival. Every inner space exists to elevate the throne. That throne belonged to Marika, but the city was never just her seat. It was her argument. The Golden Order needed a physical center to prove that its laws were eternal, that grace flowed from one unquestionable source. Leyndell provided that illusion. If the Erd tree stood here, then history itself pointed inward. Yet the deeper layers of the capital betray anxiety. Catacombs beneath the streets, roots threading through stone, bodies returned to the Erd tree, not as memory, but as resource. This was a system designed to recycle loyalty and erase dissent. Death did not end service. It reinforced it. Leyndell was not built to endure change. It was built to prevent it. And that is why, when the order it represented began to fracture, the city could only respond by closing in on itself. The war eventually arrives anyway. The shattering does not respect sealed gates or divine borders. Demigods clash across the lands between, and even Leyndell cannot pretend the world beyond its walls no longer exists. But when conflict reaches the capital, it does not look like conquest. It looks like strain. The city holds. Its walls remain standing. Its defenders do not rout. And that is precisely the problem. Leyndell survives the shattering intact, but survival comes at the cost of motion. The capital becomes a pressure chamber, holding the violence of the age at bay while everything inside it calcifies. This is where the contradiction sharpens. A city saved from destruction becomes a city unable to live. The people who remain are not citizens anymore. They are custodians of an idea. Soldiers guard corridors that no longer lead to authority. Nobles wander in fading finery, repeating gestures of relevance long after relevance has left them. Faith persists, but without direction. Nothing here adapts. Nothing here heals. The Golden Order was built to be absolute, not resilient. When its center fractures, it cannot bend. It can only harden. That rigidity reflects the will that shaped it. Marika does not abandon Leyndell, but she also does not renew it. The capital is preserved as a symbol, even as its function decays. It stands untouched, proof that the old order still exists somewhere, even if it no longer governs anything that matters. By the time fire finally comes, Leyndell is already hollow. The ash does not end the city's life. It merely makes visible a death that has been unfolding for years. Fire changes the meaning of everything it touches, but in Leyndell, it does not arrive as an accident. When the flame of ruin is unleashed and the Erd tree begins to burn, the capital is caught beneath its own godhood. What falls from the sky is not soot from distant war, but ash born from the Erd tree itself. The city is buried by the symbol it was built to serve. This moment reframes the entire collapse. Leyndell is not destroyed by an enemy force breaching its walls. It is entombed from above, smothered by the physical remains of divine authority, breaking apart. Streets disappear, districts vanish. What was once elevated becomes submerged, as if the city is being pressed back into the earth. And still, this is not chaos. The ash settles evenly, almost gently. The capital does not burn like a battlefield. It is sealed, finalized, made archival. The Ashen Capital is not a ruin in the usual sense. It is a monument to closure. Whatever Leyndell was meant to be, it is no longer allowed to change. This is the final expression of a long-standing logic. When preservation fails, containment follows. When containment fails, burial becomes the last resort. The Erd tree's destruction does not free the city beneath it. It erases it. At the center of that erasure is Marika. Whether by intent or inevitability, the outcome is the same. Leyndell is not given a future beyond the Golden Order. Once that order collapses, the city is permitted only to end. The ash does not ask whether Leyndell was worth saving. It answers the question by removing the city from the conversation entirely. Beneath the ash, something smaller tells the truth more clearly than the burning tree ever could. Leyndell's roots do not simply pass under the city. They intrude. They break through floors, walls, catacombs, coiling through spaces meant for people. This was not an accident of growth. It was tolerated, allowed, perhaps even intended. Bodies were fed into this system through Erd tree burial, not to be remembered but to be processed. Death in the capital was not an ending. It was a return to infrastructure. Over time, the city ceased to distinguish between citizen and material. Stone, corpse, root, and law all became part of the same loop. This is why Leyndell feels empty even before it is buried. Not abandoned, but consumed. The city was being hollowed out from below, long before ash fell from above. What remained was architecture without population, ritual without audience. That quiet consumption reflects the same governing instinct seen everywhere else. Marika did not need Leyndell to thrive. She needed it to persist long enough to prove a point. Once it had done so, the city's remaining substance was negotiable. Leyndell was not destroyed in a moment. It was repurposed until there was nothing left to save. What Leyndell leaves behind is not just rubble, but a lesson written into the landscape of the lands between. A capital can be flawless in design and still fail in purpose. Walls can hold, faith can persist, symbols can endure, and none of it guarantees life. The Tarnished walks through Leyndell long after its relevance has ended, not as a liberator, but as an archaeologist of decisions. Every intact corridor testifies to restraint. Every buried street confirms refusal. This was a city kept pristine long enough to prove that order could be frozen, even as everything else burned. That frozen quality is the final contradiction. Leyndell is not remembered as a tragedy by those who built it. It is remembered as proof that the Golden Order did not collapse because it was weak, but because the world outside it refused to remain still. At the center of that proof stands Marika. The capital reflects her legacy more honestly than any statue or scripture. She does not rule through adaptation. She rules through preservation, even when preservation demands sacrifice. Leyndell was never meant to survive the end of the Golden Order. It was meant to outlast doubt. And once doubt was gone, once the world had moved on without it, the city had served its purpose. What remains is a question the ash cannot answer, but the ruins quietly ask every Tarnished who walks among them. If saving a city means emptying it of life, was it ever truly saved at all?